Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Dr. Tricia Cardner and Elliot Rowe. So Tricia, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Tricia Cardner. I'm the author of Positive Poker, and I do sports psychology and peak performance training for poker players and other people who want exceptional results.
And I'm Elliot Rowe. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I specialize in working with poker players, UFC fighters, and stockbrokers. And this week, Tricia, what have you got for us news-wise?
Well, I'll tell you what, there has just been a study that was published, and it came out in a journal called Health Psychology. And what they were looking at is the way we react to stress helpful or harmful to our health? And of course, we know that if we get very upset and anxious, that's harmful to us. But this study was looking at the opposite side of it and seeing if positive emotions could provide some protection for us. And basically what the research found is that people who remain calm and or cheerful in the face of irritations had lower risk of inflammation. And chronic inflammation, which can come to us from stress, or in the poker world, we kind of know it as tilt, that actually can lead to real significant health problems like cancer, heart disease, obesity, and a lot of other just bad stuff. So basically, it's not how much stress you have or how much tilt you have. It's kind of how you choose to react to it that's going to determine the health consequences. So if you are getting tilted at the table, I recommend you try to remain calm, do some deep centered breathing, and try to just let it roll off your back.
Yeah, there's no value in getting even more angry at the table, is there?
No, there really isn't.
And a bit of a treat for everyone this week. We've got Chris Moneymaker coming on the show to talk about his life in poker and what he's found from the mindset side of the game. So let's give Chris a call. So Chris, thanks for coming on the show. If you could just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. My name's Chris Moneymaker. I won the 2003 World Series of Poker main event. I'm currently a PokerStars Team Pro and an ambassador for the Hollywood Poker Open, and I'm getting ready to go out and play the Hollywood Poker Open main event and play the World Series here for the summer of 2015.
Excellent. And as you know, our show's a lot about mindset. And how much do you feel that mindset has impacted you as a poker player over your career?
Honestly, I think mindset's my biggest thing I have that holds me back. I really feel like when I'm playing my A game, one of the top poker players out there, I don't really feel like other players beat me. I feel that I usually beat myself. I get into leveling wars with myself. I probably have a little bit of an ADD issue. So I honestly think that, my mind is really what gets in the way a lot of times, especially later on in the day when I get tired. My mindset seems to waver, and it's something I'm constantly working on.
What kinds of things do you do or would you recommend players do in order to, alleviate some of these leaks you're talking about?
I read a good book, 10% Happier by Dan Harris, and I have a lot of things going on in my head where, I'm always talking to myself if I make a bad play or if I take a bad beat. I'm really difficult on myself. I don't want to say I beat myself up, but I try to get the chips back quickly and try to recover quicker than I need to. So basically what I've started doing is just doing some meditation, and I'm not really good at meditation. I can't sit there and do a 30-minute meditation period, but I can sit there and listen to some calming music and relax for 5 or 10 minutes, and it just puts me at ease a little bit. I've gone through a mental coach. I've done a session with Elliot. I've tried a lot of different things. I would wear a rubber band on my wrist and snap it every time a negative thought entered my mind. I've done yoga. I've done a lot of different things to try and be where I'm playing my best at all times. I'm approaching 40 years old, and I realize that playing my best at all times is just not an option. So I've cut myself some slack now through, I guess, playing this game long enough. I realize I'm not going to be playing my A game for 14 hours a day. One thing I do need to do is get into better shape because I generally get tired after about 8 hours of play. I've done tracking of my win rates, and after about 8 hours, my win rate falls drastically. And part of it is a little bit me getting up in age, but biggest thing is probably just me being out of shape and not eating the right foods and being healthy. And that affects your mental status, and, your whole thing sort of works as one machine, and I'm not taking care of the physical part of it, so it affects me mentally.
That's probably the most honest answer we've ever had from anyone on the show. From that side, obviously that physical is a big part of how you're going to be playing at the table. Have you made any major changes there, or is it something that you're struggling with?
I'm struggling with it. I've tried several different diets. Last year I tried to do a health product, and, I started it, and everything was going fine for the first week. And then, I would move locations, and it just got more and more difficult to keep up with the health products and to keep the shipments coming to what location. I'm always on the move. I'm home 1 week in Michigan, 1 week in Ohio the next. And it's just really difficult for me with my travel schedule. I mean, it's more of an excuse, but I'm a very lazy person when it comes to my physical health. And I just fall back into Cokes and Mountain Dews and eating cheeseburgers instead of drinking water and doing the right thing. So it's definitely a struggle for me. I like to eat my food. When I go on the road, I pack my running shoes, I pack my workout clothes. But honestly, without my wife there to do it with me and to support me, I find that it's just easier to hit the snooze button and wake up at tournament time than to get up that 2 hours earlier to go do my jog and do the exercise that I need to do. So, yeah, it's definitely a constant struggle for me. I wish I could say that I've got it figured out, but I don't. I mean, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I've got my game plan to where, when I go to the World Series, I know what I'm supposed to do, but doing it has seemed to have been a very big problem for me actually, getting it done.
I think what you're saying, everybody who's listening can probably relate to this, because who hasn't had problem with like diet and exercise? And it can be so challenging. Just like you said, you know what to do, but you don't do it. So I bet everybody can just really relate to what you're saying. I kind of want to shift gears just a little bit. I always wanted to ask you about the psychology of being responsible for the poker boom. You're like in such a unique position because you kind of set off, and people even talk about the moneymaker effect. So what has been just kind of the psychology of being responsible for that?
It's really weird. I probably went through like 3 different transformations with that mentally. I mean, in the very beginning, it didn't really affect me that much. First of all, I didn't know the poker boom was going to explode the way it did. And poker's sort of always been this way for me because I wasn't around before this poker boom. So I just thought poker was always this way, that everybody was playing. It was always just a big deal. But to be honest, I didn't feel the pressure much early on, and I really got complacent with the game. I thought I had the game figured out. I mean, I was just an amateur, and I won this big tournament. The third tournament I play, I get second place. I really just felt like I just sort of had a natural knack for the game, and I didn't really need to study the game. I didn't need to improve, yada, yada, this and that. But then after a while, after about probably a year or two, the results were not doing what, during the first year and a half of me playing sort of quote unquote professionally, I won the main event. I got second at WPT, final table at a PLO event. I made another couple deep runs where I got really unlucky late. So I was having all these good results, and then they just sort of stopped. And I blamed a lot of it on bad luck and, just let it go and didn't really think about it. But then after, probably about 4 years of at a certain point, you got to quit saying it's luck and, you're just missing something. So I started getting self-conscious of my plays. I didn't want to, do something stupid on the table. My mind went to, before I moved all in, or before I made a big call, I wanted to think, what would people think? That, am I playing like an idiot? If I was on the TV table, I didn't want to make mistakes. So that went on for a while, and then I, basically just started studying the game again and got more comfortable with that side of it. But still mentally, I just wasn't as hungry or sharp or whatever you want to put it. I don't even know the best way to even answer the question, because I just never felt that hunger for the longest time. And to this day, when I sit down, I still enjoy playing poker. I'm never burnt out from it. But when I sit down and play, I know after a certain period of time, my brain's going to wander and do something else. So I went through a period where, I was really conscious of what I was doing and being concerned about what people thought, to now I don't really care what people think, because I know when I'm playing my A game, I'm confident I'm a good player. I've put the time in to learn the game. So, that side of it, like if I make a really bad play, it doesn't bother me anymore, which is a good thing, obviously. But now it's just, I'm 12 years older, 13 years older, and my body just does not react to the way it used to do. I mean, I have sleep apnea. I don't use my CPAP machine, so I don't sleep that well at night. And then I don't exercise and I eat poorly. So you add all that stuff up, it doesn't really equate to an athlete, which if you look at the tournament circuit in today's world, I mean, most of the top players have trainers that travel with them, or, they're juicing and doing all this other health stuff. So it just comes down to, I realize that mentally I get tired and I'm not doing what I need to do to improve on that. So, when I play cash games, after 8 hours, I just shut it up and go home. But tournaments, you can't do that.
It's quite interesting that you said that drive isn't there in quite the same way. And I mean, when I speak to lots of players, their dream is to win the World Series main event. And that's literally where your career started. So do you think that might play a role in this? The fact that you reached that pinnacle on almost day one of your career, and there's not really the same huge goal for you that there is for almost every other player out there.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. I mean, obviously I want to do it again. Every year it comes around, I get excited for this time of year, but I have won it once, and, I don't grind like the normal guys do. I don't play the circuit all the time. I've got, endorsement deals. I've got other things going on. I spend time with my family more than I play a lot of times. It's like when I'm at home, I hang out with my 3 kids. I live a dual life in a lot of ways. When I'm at home, I don't play any poker, and I go on the road and all of a sudden switch into poker mode. I mean, I've been home for 3 weeks. I go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, get the kids to school, or, we do whatever we do during the day. Poker never really enters my mind, other than the business side of it. And then all of a sudden tomorrow I'll get on a plane and, immediately I'll be going to bed at 4 a.m. and getting up at 11 in the morning. And it's just, it's really taxing to, switch back and forth doing that on a consistent basis. I kind of got used to it, I guess, but it's still, I mean, I just know mentally I'm not preparing myself to be the best I can be.
Do you experience a lot of pressure just because you have won the main event? So I don't mean internal pressure, but I mean external pressure from, people just expecting, something out of you?
Well, the good thing is for me, everybody for the longest time thought I was just a fluke and thought I was terrible. So that helped. And now, I mean, people I've played with like, man, you're not as bad as I thought you were. You're actually a really good player. Which, I don't want to feed that. I want people to think I'm bad. It's actually better when people think that you're a bad player. I went through a phase where I didn't want anybody to think I was bad, but now, I embrace the fact that if someone thinks I'm bad, that's good. That's good for business. I don't want people to think that I'm a good player. As long as I continue to make money at the game, I continue to enjoy the game. I always feel like whenever I sit down at a table, I'm trying to entertain the table in a sense. I'm trying to have a good time with them, but I'm also there to win money. And usually when I play cash games, I do quite well. Tournaments, I play very well for a long period of time. I mean, I'm the ambassador for the HBO, and I think I run up a stack every single event. I make the final table. I think I've made 12 final tables, but I've only won 2 of them. So, I'm just having a problem finishing them off at the end. But, overall, I'm pretty happy with my play, considering the fact that, we play till 2 a.m. and by the time 11 o'clock rolls around, I can barely keep my eyes open anymore. So I'm trying to learn to wake up a little bit later, especially on day one, late register, do the Phil Hellmuth, and, try to cut my days a little bit shorter.
And with obviously you're such a well-known name, do you feel that people play differently against you? Do you think people are just so desperate to get your scalp that they'll open with different hands, they'll play hands differently perhaps than they would play another player at the table?
It used to be that way a ton. I mean, people played really polarized against me. They either were afraid of me or they went out of their way to play pots with me. And you still see it to some extent. But I think the game's evolved to a point now to where, back in the day, it was just something very unique to play with someone you've seen on TV. But it's been on TV now for 12 years. The guys that come up and play now, especially the younger guys, they're there for the money. They're not really there for the story. The people that are trying to outplay me are the people that you wouldn't expect, the 40-year-olds, the 45-year-olds, the armchair guys that, saw me on TV and started. All the young guys, none of them really try to outplay me. I don't feel like, most of them are saying, I was 11 years old when you won. It was cool watching you on TV, but, I'm here to win money. So for literally about 10 years, it seemed like everybody's trying to make plays at me, and I still get called, I still call down light because people still do make plays at me. I mean, in a higher proportion than other people, but I don't think people go out of their way as much as they used to. Part of that is just because the game's evolved. The other part of it is, you know, time has passed, and people got to play with a bunch of people off TV, and it's not as much of a, I remember playing with Jack something or other. I can't remember his last name. Where he won the World Series in like '84, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world playing with the World Series of Poker champion. This is before I won the main event. I thought he was otherworldly. And that's the way, I sort of grew into poker thinking, the world champions were like superhuman, could read your soul, and were the best players ever. And, now the World Series has sort of lost its luster a little bit, maybe, with these huge fields and some of the amateurs, making deep runs like myself. I mean, I just don't think that it carries what it used to carry, I don't think, in the game.
Yeah, poker, it has evolved so quickly, just in the last, like you said, 12 years. I mean, it's night and day different from what it was when you won the main event.
Oh, yeah,
But
it's amazing how different it is.
I was going to ask you a question. I know you have a chapter in Jonathan Little's Excelling at No Limit Hold'em on the lower buy-in tournament strategies. Do you want to talk for a minute about just what inspired you to get involved with that and a little bit about what your chapter is about?
Sure. Well, I wrote a book back in 2004. It was just my autobiography, and I had a ghostwriter. After that experience, I said I would never write a book again. I was never an English person in school. I was more of a math and science guy. So writing that book was just painstaking for me. So Jonathan Little approached me about writing a chapter, and I immediately said, I'm not really interested. And I never would have wrote the chapter, 5 years ago. But after, a couple days of thought, I wrote him back and said, yeah, I'd be interested in writing something on low-limit poker tournaments. I really felt like, I'd worked really hard on that part of my game. Being the ambassador for the HPO, I'd played a lot of those events. I don't go around playing as many 10Ks as most of the other pros. I mean, my average buy-in's probably $1,500 to $2,000. So I just felt like I was really suited. I know how those players play. I felt like I was just really suited to comment on the differences between a $10,000 player and a $1,500 player. There's not many world champions that'll go and play their daily tournament at a local casino. I've done that. I enjoy playing the game of poker. I enjoy playing with people. I just enjoy the social aspect of it, which a lot of people miss out on. But in doing that, I just see the different skill levels and how the different levels play. So I felt like I was able to comment on all the different levels of players, all the way from your home game / daily tournament at your casino, all the way through up to the main event. I mean, you don't really ever see a main event player go and play a $60 tournament, and you don't see a $60 tournament go play a 10K. It just doesn't happen that often. And the only time it ever happens is when someone satellites in and they take a shot. But they're still going to play the way they played the $60 tournament. So, but there's a huge difference, obviously, between someone that consistently plays a 10K versus someone that consistently plays a $60 or a $100 tournament. They think differently, they play differently. So I just delve into the thought processes and why, if a $10,000 tournament player comes down and plays a $100 buy-in, the strategies he's using are not going to be effective, and vice versa. And I just sort of go into different hands and explain what the thought processes are and how hands are played out differently, and how just the thought processes of each player is so different amongst the different levels of buy-ins.
That's awesome, especially right now because, I'm sitting out here in Las Vegas during the World Series of Poker, and you do have the full range. You have people can play the little nightly or the deep stacks, which are a couple $100 buy-in all the way up to what, $50,000 buy-in. So you've really got something for everyone here, but there's not as much written about those lower buy-ins and the proper strategy. So I was really glad to see your chapter.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's my first paragraph is, all the books today are geared towards $10,000 buy-ins or big, they're all written by all these famous guys that but they're all geared towards 10K buy-ins. They're all geared towards the big tournaments that no one really plays. I mean, honestly, like when I wrote the chapter, I didn't even know Jonathan Little had a lower buy-in book. I think Jonathan Little wrote something about lower buy-ins, and I found that out actually later looking at all the work he's done. But he's one of the very few that's written on low-level tournaments that I'm aware of. So the topic is not covered near as much as, for say, like, you see so many books, or they're all written about $10,000 buy-ins and all these super high rollers, and the plays just don't translate to the lower levels. I mean, you never see four betting in a $1,000 buy-in event. It's some regional event. You just don't see four bets. In a $10,000 buy-in event, you're going to see a four bet every other hand. It's just it's a totally different way to play.
And I mean, I think this year with the Colossus, that's probably brought the two sides of the game closer together. Because I know certainly I spoke to a lot of pros who were shocked by the different type of play they saw. Because I think I heard that something like 80% of the people in the Colossus had never played a bracelet event before. So it sort of mixed these two worlds in one 25,000 person event.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting 25,000 people putting up $500. You're getting a lot of those amateur players, and those amateur players are going to really confuse a lot of the pros. I mean, if you've been playing with pros that are playing $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 buy-in events, and you play with a guy who's been playing with his friends in his home game, you're going to think the guy's an idiot. But at the same time, you're going to make some plays, and he's going to think you're an idiot. I mean, you're just on different wavelengths.
And all those years in all of those tournaments, Chris, what's the sort of craziest behaviour you've seen at the table? Is there anything that really stands out as someone really having just an absolute blow-up at the table?
I mean, Phil Hellmuth is obviously famous for his blow-ups, and he's probably the one I've seen, most of the time, other than people getting upset, just randomly. Greg Raymer ripped some cards a couple of years ago. For the most part in today's game, with the exception of like during the World Series when it's so much pressure in that tournament, most other tournaments that you go around, everybody pretty much handles themselves pretty well. You don't see the blow-ups that you once did. I think some of the passion's out of the game maybe, or people are desensitized to it a little bit more now. People still go on tilt. They still get frustrated, but I think there was just more, I don't know the right word, passion is what I would use, in a couple of years ago, where people got more invested in the game when they took a bad beat or when something bad happened. And you see it during the World Series, because you'll see these people satellite in, and this is their one time they get to play the main event, and for them to take a bad beat, they get emotional. But if you go to Barcelona for the 10K EPT and someone takes a bad beat, they'll shake your hand and walk out the door, and you wouldn't even know they even had a bad beat. And that's what most of the year it's like. I mean, you play any of the regional events, people take bad beats, they just smile about it and move on. You play, most of the other 10K events, people just don't seem to be as invested. They don't get as frustrated. You don't see the passion, except for what maybe in Brazil you'll see it. But outside of Brazil, you really don't see it that often. That and the main event, that's really the only two times I ever go and see people just, showing a lot of emotion and a lot of passion on the table.
Do you think that actually improves the game? So, going and playing a tournament in Brazil and seeing that passion, does that make it more fun, or is it quite frustrating and annoying seeing people not dealing with their beats effectively?
Oh, no, I think it's much more enjoyable. I think it's great when people are passionate about the game and care. I mean, I remember Havad Khan doing Bulldozer and all this stuff. I mean, those type of characters are what make poker fun. Poker's supposed to be enjoyable. Poker's supposed to be, you're supposed to be excited when you win a big hand. I mean, you're not supposed to act like you won the tournament, but, I mean, you're supposed to get excited. I mean, when I won the World Series, there were several times where I did a fist pump or I got excited. You just don't see that as much anymore. You only see it in the main event. You don't see it hardly ever in other events. And I think it's just missing in the game. I mean, people, laugh when people do it. And that's part of the reason people don't do it. It's like, someone will say something like, oh, everybody go home. He just won the tournament. And, it's the third level. But he hit a big hand and he was excited. That's good. Let the guy celebrate, It sucks for the guy that lost, of course, but at the same time, I mean, there's definitely, we're not playing college football. There's room for celebration in the game.
Do you think that would improve the numbers of people playing the game, the numbers of people coming into the game, if there was a bit of that fun coming back in and it wasn't so looked down upon by some of the pros?
I mean, the game's obviously, it's been hurting the last couple of years. The online portion of it's a huge portion of that. The other thing is the economy. The game itself sort of lends itself to ebbs and flows. I mean, you know, we had all these new players coming in because it was cool. It was on TV. Everybody wanted to be doing it. We're not on TV anymore. And that's, the online side of it, while it's important, it's really the TV, all those online companies were paying for the TV side of it. And that's what got all the new players in. It was a cool thing to do. I mean, when I had all these young kids coming up to me that wanted to be like me instead of being like Michael Jordan, when I grew up, I had Michael Jordan on my wall. I mean, I go to a charity event and, I remember there was Tiki Barber, Rondé Barber at these events, and I would be there and all the kids would be wanting to learn to play poker with me. It was the cool thing to do for a long period of time. And now we've lost that influx of new players coming in, and the game is it's a zero-sum game. If you don't have new money coming in, the money's going to evaporate eventually. So, I don't think poker's dying by any stretch, but it's definitely contracting a little and getting smaller. And until we're able to bring it back to TV, make it a cool, fun thing again, I think the numbers are going to continue to decline.
Do you think that the TV is going to come back with, potential? I mean, obviously you work for the company, but, is there any potential for PokerStars to be coming back into the States and this sort of the TV relaunch and that side of things?
Well, I've been with PokerStars since the beginning, and since Black Friday, I mean, for the first couple of years, it was, we're trying to get back in. We don't know. I've probably heard 3 or 4 different dates when, we're coming back. Yeah, we're coming back. And after a while, I'm just to the point now, well, we'll just wait and see. I mean, obviously, I want them to come back just like everybody else. The problem is I don't ever think that they're going to get back into it. It'll never be like it was. I mean, if they get back in New Jersey, that's great. It's a foothold, but, they're still going to have the liquidity problems that the WSOP has, and they're not going to come back in all of a sudden just go gangbusters, just being in New Jersey. I mean, we got to get a federal level gambling going where we can share liquidity with the entire world, and we're a long way away from that. We may never get back to that. But if we do get it back in New Jersey, we get it back in some other states, maybe we get some funding for some TV, and, there's talk of a Poker Central coming out that's going to be a 24-hour poker network. So maybe we're moving back towards that a little bit. A lot of players that used to play, they found other things to do. I mean, there's daily fantasy sports, there's just life in general. And a lot of the friends I played with 4 years ago, you don't see them playing anymore. They're doing something else.
Yep, there's just a whole new crop of players, but you're still hanging in there with them. And I think that's what makes your story so interesting. You've been around since the beginning of the boom. And even when people counted you out, you're still here and you're still a great ambassador for the sport, I guess if you want to call it a sport, of poker.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt like, I was never an ambassador. I was always myself, but I just relate well with people. I'm pretty easy to talk to. I just like to have a good time when I'm playing, and I think that, when I come into town, I make the game fun for everybody that I can. I want everybody to walk away with a good experience. So, I mean, I remember Phil Hellmuth talking to me for 15 minutes after he won his bracelet before I had won mine. And I just remember that experience, and I want to give other people that experience. If they have questions, I want to make sure I answer all the questions. And there's so many pros out there that will belittle a recreational player's plays or, laugh under their breath or whatever it might be. And, that definitely hurts the game in its own right. So you have people like Jason Somerville, Danny Negreanu, who, really embrace the newer players and try to make it fun for everybody. And that's sort of the line that I usually always try to take is I want everybody, even if the guy comes in and goes broke, I at least want him to say he had a good time, it was good entertainment. I mean, people go to casinos still to this day. When you walk in the casino, you're going to go broke. I mean, they're not there because they're giving out money, but people continue to go. And they continue to go because they have a good time, it's entertainment, and playing poker, yet you still need to give the people the entertainment side of it. That's what poker pros don't get. And you see some of these guys that, get all serious and, again, they look down on other players or whatever it is, you're just running off your own customer. So, yeah, you are. I mean, everybody that sits down at the table is my customer. I want them to have a good experience. I want them to come back again. They don't have to play against me, but I want them to be in the game. I want them to be, learning the game, teaching other people the game. The more people that play, the more people that play with their friends, the better game's going to be. When I won the World Series, poker rooms were shutting down. We're going through that a little bit now. Everything was getting smaller. People weren't playing. The game was probably dying back then. I gave it a nice big shot in the arm, and we need another little shot. I don't know where that shot's going to come from until, unless we get legislation. People say a woman winning the main event, or, I don't think anybody winning the main event is going to give any other shot in the arm. I think that time's passed.
I mean, to be crass, it's probably Sheldon dying, isn't it?
Yeah,
to be honest, that's why it's not happening. It's being blocked.
Yeah, I mean, his money has definitely put a big issue on it. But at the same time, his money definitely hurts. But I don't think we've been close on a federal level. Really, I don't think we've really been that close to getting federal legislation passed. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, before even Sheldon was even in the mix, it was the closest we've been. There's just, the government moves slow, and they've got a lot of other priorities on the table rather than online poker. My first thought was, well, they have to legalize it because there's so much tax revenue that they could generate off of it. Well, the problem with that argument is, if they want to generate tax revenue, they would just legalize sports gambling or marijuana, which obviously they're doing now. I was a proponent of that. I don't smoke marijuana, but if you want to bring tax dollars in, that's a good way to do it, because more people do that than they do play poker. But, you don't see it on federal level, so, I don't know if it'll ever get back to a federal level. I hope it does, and I was a big proponent / advocate, or not optimist, I guess. I was a big optimist that we would get a federal level bill passed for the longest period of time. Now I'm sort of turned negative on it. I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong, but I just don't see one coming in the near future.
Well, maybe the shot in the arm that everyone needs is the Moneymaker Effect Part 2. So just get in here and win the main event again.
Well, I'll volunteer. If I have to fall on the sword, I'll volunteer to do it. If that's what it takes to get a Poker Boom Part 2.
You'll take another main event if you have to.
If I have to.
If you have to.
If I have to, one every 15 years, just for the little shot that the game needs.
It's good of you, Chris. We appreciate it.
I'm here for you guys. Again, you guys are my customers. I'm here for you.
Well, Chris,
got to grow the business.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a really enjoyable talk with you. Really educational as well. You're going through all of these things with us. Good luck in the World Series. If anyone out there sees Chris, go and say hi. As you know, he's told you that he's happy to say hello. And we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
And that was great to hear from Chris there. He was incredibly honest about his issues at the table and what he's been doing over the years. It was really good to hear a poker player talk through the sort of things that I'm sure a lot of our listeners feel at the table every week.
It was so interesting to hear him say that his biggest leak is basically his mindset, and just think of what kind of results he could have if he could improve on that leak, because he was talking about how he can play his A game for 8 hours, but then beyond that, it starts to break down.
Yeah, and I think that's a key part of that was that concept of physical fitness. I know Chris alluded to it quite a bit through the interview. There is such an edge to be gained by being in strong physical shape. And, that's where you see it. It's 8 hours into the tournament, you hit the dinner break, and it can really impact your profitability after dinner if you're not in the shape you need to be. There are a lot of guys out there who are athletes now, and to be very competitive, you need to do that.
I know people don't necessarily realize what a grind these tournaments are, and they may not even notice when their game has fallen off. But if you're just not in shape, it just can fall off so quickly. And then you either, maybe you dust off a big stack, or you just make a silly mistake or whatever, and you don't get the results that you could have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, so get down the gym, everybody. It's going to pay off but let poker pay for your gym sessions.
Exactly.
Okay, everyone. Well, thanks for listening this week. Tricia, where can people find your products?
They can go over to drtriciacardner.com, or they can follow me on Twitter at drtriciacardner to find out more about what I have going on.
And you can find my products on pokermindcoach.com. I've actually released a number of new MP3s for specific problems, things like confidence at the poker table, focus, improving your volume, dealing with bad beats. So go and check those out. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
Thanks, guys.